be starting class. My name's Ryan. I will be teaching you guys English. So yeah, on the English section, there are 75 questions and you get 45 minutes to do them. So it's about 36 seconds per question. So pretty quick. A lot. You have to answer the most questions in the least amount of time for out of all the other sections. And today we'll just be going over a little bit of punctuation and yeah. So first thing is independent versus dependent clauses. So an independent clause is something that can stand by itself, make a sentence by itself. Dependent clause, you need to add something to it in order for it to be a complete sentence. So independent clause always must contain a subject and a verb, and a dependent clause, it can contain a subject and a verb, but it won't make sense if you just put it on by itself. For example, independent clause would be Jane ate pizza. So that could be a sentence by itself. It doesn't need anything added to it in order for it to be a sentence. And an example of a dependent clause would be because she was hungry. So if you put those two together, Jane ate pizza because she was hungry, that makes sense. But if you just said because she was hungry, that wouldn't make sense. So it's a dependent clause. A lot of times you'll see words like because, or after, or during.
Ryan, make sure it's recording, okay?
Yeah, it's recording. Or words like that just to that make it a dependent clause. But if you remove that word, it would make sense. And then it would be independent clause. A couple more examples is Bob plays hockey. That's an independent clause. A dependent clause for that would be as he enjoys it. Just because that as at the front of the sentence makes it so that it's a dependent clause. So we'll just do some practice here. Just this first one here, although it was raining, just that underlined part, is that independent or dependent? Yep, because you couldn't just have that part by a sentence by itself. If I said although it was raining, you couldn't put a period after that. Maria went for a jog. That independent or dependent?
Independent.
Yep. So you could just have that and it make sense by itself. This underlined part, whenever she gets a poor grade in class, independent or dependent? Yep. Again, if you said that, it's mostly because of this word whenever. That makes it a dependent clause and it couldn't be a sentence by itself there. After the flood.
Dependent.
Yep, the after. John saw a raccoon.
Independent.
I'll just say some more now, and just tell me if they're independent or dependent. When you finish your homework. I just said when you finish your homework. Is that independent or dependent?
Dependent.
Because of the when. After Juan completed the assignment. Yep, because of the after. She had to drive to Atlanta for a meeting. Alrighty. So this introduces us to comma rules, because comma rules have a lot to do with independent and dependent clauses. So yeah, one sec. So the first comma rule is that commas separate introductory phrases from the rest of the sentence. So they separate introductory phrases from the rest of the sentence. So if you ever see an introductory phrase, usually keywords for that are after or before or during, words that kind of form a dependent clause and make an introductory phrase. Or a lot of ing words too, like any word ending in ing. introductory phrases. So, an example of that would be after 7 hours of studying. Comma. She increased her ACT score. So here we can see like this part right here is the introductory phrase after 7 hours of studying, and then you need a comma after that to introduce the rest of the sentence. Another example of that would be over the years, comma, our band has gotten a lot better. And one of those with an ing like words is knowing my teacher would be mad if I was late, comma, I made sure to be on time. So whenever it has like knowing or a lot of those ing words, that makes it an introductory phrase, and then you're going to need a comma after it. So this is just a practice one. So in the morning we woke up early to go fishing. Where would I have to put the comma there?
After morning.
So the introductory part is morning, in the morning. So after you have that introductory phrase there, you're going to need to put a comma. Where are you going to put the comma there? From our window on the 3rd floor, I can see it says 4 miles.
After 4.
Perfect. If I just turn this around, could you guys see it fine? I don't know. It's so hard to write them all out. You guys read better now.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the next one says, from our window, or wait, no. To avoid traffic, my dad took an alternate route. Where would you put the comma there? If you're driving. As the boat turned, about a dozen dolphins began to follow it.
After turn.
Having chosen nursing as a career, Suzanne enrolled in many science courses.
After
Yep. From outside the 12-mile fishing limits off the coast of Maine, a strange phenomenon has been reported. After Maine. Okay. Rule number 2. You use a pair of commas to hug a interrupting phrase, so, or a non-essential phrase. So I'll just write, this one right up here. It's so hard to write down. Did you guys all get that?
Yeah.
Okay. So use a pair of commas to hug a non-essential phrase. A lot of times they call these by the way phrases because it's something that doesn't need to be there, but they put it in there, and if you would remove it, then the sentence would still make complete sense. So here's an example of why they would like call it by the way phrase. So I'm freaking out, comma, by the way, comma, because I have a big test tomorrow. So if you were to remove that middle section there, it would just read, I'm freaking out because I have a big test tomorrow, and that makes complete sense. So it's okay to put commas on either side of it, because if you were to remove it, it would still make sense. Another example, when you're describing people or like what they do for a job, a lot of times you have to hug that in with commas. So this one says Joey, comma, the homeless man at the subway stop, comma, plays the guitar. So if you were to remove the stuff in the middle, the homeless man at the subway stop, it would just read Joey plays the guitar, which makes complete sense. Like it could be a sentence by itself. So then you're gonna need to hug that part in the middle with commas. The next one says Steve, comma, who loves tennis so much he wears white shorts to school, comma, has a tournament in Phoenix next week. So if you remove the part that's hugged by commas, it just reads Steve has a tournament in Phoenix next week. So you need to hug that middle part with commas. Or my brother Ron, comma, an optometrist, comma, owns his own practice. So there it's like that job description where my brother Ron owns his own practice would make complete sense, but you're just describing like what he does. It's something that doesn't need to be in the sentence, but is an extra part, so it needs to be hugged by commas. Okay. I'll just turn it around again, see if that works. It says Patterson Tower, the recently completed office building, is a monument to concrete ugliness. Where would we have to put the commas there?
Before the and after building?
So just building?
Or before the and after building?
Oh, okay, yeah. Yep, Patterson Tower, comma, the recently completed office building, comma, is a monument to concrete ugliness. Yep. So there, if you just remove that part, you read Patterson Tower is a monument to concrete ugliness, it would make sense. So that middle part is a non-essential phrase and can be removed or hugged by commas. Okay, the next one, John decided nonetheless to buy the car.
After decided and before not.
Perfect. Just removing nonetheless or hugging that part with commas. The Mississippi River, which once flowed north into Hudson Bay, flows south into the Gulf of Mexico.
The river.
Mhm.
It's after bay, right?
Yeah,
I can't see it.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
Is that better? Can you guys still see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Your cat watching the dog intently walked carefully away.
After cat,
Mm-hmm.
right before walk.
Yeah. So your cat, comma, watching the dog intently, comma, walked carefully away. Perfect. The next one. TV commercials, sometimes the most entertaining parts of a program are essentially flashy corporate propaganda.
After commercials,
Yep.
and then
After program.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So TV commercials, comma, sometimes the most entertaining parts of a program, comma, are essentially flashy corporate propaganda. We'll just do one more here. The dam project, which many in the government consider to be a sign of national strength, will destroy hundreds of villages and vast areas of wildlife habitat along the river banks.
After, it can be after dam or project, can it?
before which,
Yeah.
Yeah, so after project there. And then what's the second one?
After stirring.
Mm-hmm. So the dam project, comma, which many in the government consider to be a sign of national strength, comma, will destroy hundreds of villages and vast areas of wildlife habitat along the river banks. Okay,
Dam,
perfect.
comma, be wrong.
Yeah, it would be because then they would read the dam project, which many in government, like, that is really nice. It's the dam project is like the subject there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You guys got this all written down? Okay. Rule number 3. Commas separate two independent clauses, along with what they call a fanboy. So that's a word like for, and, nor, but, yet, or so. So, that's right. So two independent clauses can be separated by a comma and then for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. Any of those words in between. So, example of that would be
Yeah, let's go ahead.
okay, so here we can see the independent clause. I'm thinking of going to Georgetown. That could be a sentence all by itself. And then after comma on the but, I had a great time visiting Iowa. That could also be a sentence by itself. So here we have two independent clauses. So one way we can separate them is with a comma and then one of those fanboys, so the but there. Another example of that is Steve was the best soccer player in his region, comma, so they invited him to try out for the national team. So the first part, Steve was the best soccer player in his region, that could be a sentence by itself, so it's an independent clause. And then the second part, they invited him to try out for the national team, that also could be a sentence by itself. So then you need that comma and the so to separate them. Another example, I'll have a Coke, comma, and I'll have a shake. So I'll have a shake, I'll have a Coke, those are both independent clauses. Just need the comma and the fanboy to separate them. If you see an independent clause and then like a fanboy, so one of those connecting words, and then a dependent clause, you don't need a comma. So if this said, I'm thinking of going to Georgetown, but if you just erase that I, had a great time visiting Iowa, then you don't need this comma anymore. Because this part, had a great time visiting Iowa, that's a dependent clause now. And that makes it so that we don't need a comma to separate the two. We just need that connecting word. So if you ever see an independent, then a dependent, with the connecting word, you don't need a comma to separate them. Or like another example is, I'll have a Coke and a shake. You don't need a comma to separate those two. It's just two things you're listing. I'll write a couple up here and then I'll turn it around. Or we need to put the comma there. That clock looks expensive, but it doesn't work.
After expensive.
Mm-hmm. Power went out, so the guests had to leave.
After out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's turn it around. We can do the rest of them. Okay, it's number 4. The store will have to stay open longer, or it will lose money.
After longer.
Yep. John has a large garden, for he loves to grow vegetables.
After garden.
Mm-hmm. The game was over, but the crowd refused to leave.
After over.
Yep. The student explained her question, yet the instructor still didn't seem to understand.
After question.
Yep. Yesterday was her brother's birthday, so she took him out to dinner.
After birthday.
Yep. That would also be like an introductory phrase, so like yesterday was her brother's birthday. So you wouldn't even need to follow that rule. Okay. The next rule is just comma separate words in a list. You guys all know that one, I think, so we'll just skip over that pretty easily. You guys all got this? fifth rule is commas are used to separate like an ing phrase at the end of a sentence when the phrase refers to the entire sentence before it. So it's kind of confusing, but we'll go over a couple examples and so okay. So an example of this, Mr. Spare offered rewards to his students, comma, trying to increase their test scores. So whenever you see like an ing phrase at the end of a sentence, you're most likely going to need a comma, but a good way to test for this is if you flip the two parts of the sentence around and it still makes sense, then you need a comma there. So if I read, trying to increase their test scores, Mr. Spare offered rewards to his students, it would still make complete sense. So then we're going to need that comma there. Another example of that is the 7-year-old looked away from me when he lied, comma, reinforcing my suspicions. So if you flip that around, you could read, reinforcing my suspicions, the 7-year-old looked away from me when he lied. So if you can flip the two parts around the comma and it still makes sense, you're going to need it there. Okay. There are quite a few more comma rules. The ones I've shown are probably the most important ones. But we'll go over and I'll write down a bunch more. So okay. So you always have to use commas to separate the names of cities and states. So, if you, like an example of that is, I lived in Boston, comma, Massachusetts, or I'm from Sioux Falls, comma, South Dakota. So whenever you see a city and a state, you're gonna need a comma to separate the two. And the same goes for days and years. So an example of that is on December 31st, comma, 1999, whatever happened. So whenever you see a day and a year, you're gonna need to separate them by a comma also. Another one. You use commas to set off quotes. So if there's a quote, basically you just put a comma in front of it. So Dexter asked himself, comma, should I think more about what my country can do for me, or should I think more about what I can do for my country? So if we've seen that one a lot. If he said, comma, whatever, whenever you see a quote. This one's kind of like the non-essential, non-essential phrase. It goes along with it, but commas set off of positives is what it's. This is basically just what we went over earlier, where it says, like if you're telling a person, saying a person, and then saying what they said or what they do. So Jacques Cartier, comma, a well-known French sailor and explorer, comma, blah blah blah. So whenever you're just kind of describing what a person does. Whenever you address person by name, you need to use a comma. This is most seen in like dialogue. But like for example, Justin, comma, did you like our social studies unit? So whenever you're just talking directly to someone, you say their name, you're gonna need to set it off with a comma.
Could you move the board so we can see?
Next one is adjectives modifying the same noun. So whenever you have two or more words that are describing the same noun, you're going to need to set them off by a comma. So it's kind of like a list, but you don't need three things for this. So an example of that is grandma's cookies contain vanilla. Well, this is just a list here, but the dog had a long, comma, tight tail. So if you're describing its tail with two different adjectives, then you're going to need a comma to separate them. Okay, we'll just do some practice now. Give them a second to write it all down. Boston, Massachusetts is a hopping college town, unlike the sleepy town of Binghamton, New York. So where are we gonna need to put the commas there?
After Boston,
Yep, and
Birmingham.
yeah.
I can't do this.
Yep.
It's been-
Okay. Are there any questions about all the rules we went over before we do that? Before we go on? No questions? Anyone online have any questions?
What page are we on?
We're not on a page. We're just going over the board. Right on the board. Okay. So, how many times have I asked you, Jack, to pay attention? What?
After Jack.
And there's one more.
Before Jack.
Yeah. So I need to hug that Jack with commas because you're addressing him by name. Okay. Do you wanna? What books do you guys have? You guys have that one, okay. This isn't all gonna be commas. It's just gonna be a quick practice portion on page 52, I think. And here it's just it'll give you a little introduction of what the actually is on all the ACT, some of the questions, what they look like for English. Right, your guys' book look completely different. Oh shoot. Yeah. Yeah. So the ACT, aiming for the perfect score. Page 52. There's a sample passage there. Just do that passage quick. I'll give you like 8 minutes for that, and then we'll go over all the answers. So it's not all gonna be stuff we went over today, so if you don't know, it's fine, but it'll kind of just get you knowledge of what what's on the test and what the questions are like. Anyone still working on that? It's fine if you are. Alrighty, I'll go over the answers then. 1 is D, 2 is H, 3 is A, 4 is H, 5 is D, 6 is G, 7 is C, 8 is G, 9 is B, 10 is G, 11 is B, and 12 is G. Are there any questions on any of those?
Wait, what were the first two?
B and H. Which ones did you guys get wrong?
Let's see.
2? Okay. Two says the author is considering a different ending for the paragraph. Which of the following options matches the purpose of this paragraph? Okay. So correct answer was H, yeah. So omit the sentence and replace it with the following. We jumped on the tubes, pushed off the edge of the river, and settled into a relaxing trip. Afternoon trip. So I think that's the best to replace it because the whole first part of the paragraph is kind of leading up to the them like starting to tube, and then the rest of the passage is kind of about their tubing trip. So it does both of like introducing the next part and like finishing that paragraph there. Good. Any other questions? Alright. If not, we will just do these practice quick. So these are all common questions. I'll let everyone look at them for a couple minutes, and then we'll go over them. Alrighty. Start with this first one. As the stage curtain rose, the audience clapped. So what do we get for that one?
Afternoon.
Why?
Because that's where the independent splitter goes.
No. What was the rule for that one?
I have no idea.
It's the introductory phrase. So as the stage curtain rose. So that's like an introductory phrase for that one. Okay. Next one, by 4 in the afternoon, everyone wanted to go home.
Afternoon.
And again, what is that one?
Same thing.
Yeah. I will be happy to read your poem, comment on it, and return it to you.
After poem and
And that's just because it's a list. General Marsh, it seemed to me, trusted only 1 or 2 people.
General Marsh. After
Yep. So after Marsh and after me, why?
That's how you.
Yeah. Like it's a non-essential phrase. So, if you just remove that part in the middle, General Marsh trusted only 1 or 2 people, the sentence would still make sense. So you need to hug it with commas. Yep. Okay. In December 1977, I received my first Christmas gift.
After 1977. 1977.
In December.
So there's two there. What are the two reasons? And
Different year from the rest.
what's it like? This part right here. What's that? In December 1977. Yeah, introductory phrase. Yep. The bright creative woman worked for NASA.
Right,
Yep. Why?
describing something.
Mhm. Two adjectives describing the same noun. Yep. Alaska, the largest state in our country, contains many surprises.
After Alaska and after country.
Yep. And why?
Non-essential.
Perfect. Okay. That's what we'll end it today. You have like a 5-minute break till Manoj comes in here.